We have never been this close to finally having Diablo 4 in our hands, and in less than 30 days the game will finally release, giving us access to all 5 of the classes and all of the builds our heart desire as we push our way to max level. Over the next couple of days, I'm going to be bringing out a video per class of what I think is the foundation of a build that I would like to start with when I level each one of these characters all the way from level 1 to max level. Now, since I'll be playing Barbarian main and it'll be the first class that I try to push to max level, I figured I will start with this class and show you what I imagine to be a strong foundation to build your leveling upon. As I'm sure you've already imagined just from the name alone, this build revolves around stacking thorns on the Barbarian from as many as possible sources, which in actual fact then allows you to essentially move through packs of enemies and they kill themselves by simply walking up to you and hitting you. Now, this also works for range damage, which is the other reason why this is so damn efficient. And then of course I'm using, and this is the tornado part of the build, whirlwind to essentially just give me that little bit of additional damage, since you will be accumulating a huge amount of rage with this build and you need something to spend that primary resource. Now, of course, another alternative here is upheaval. For the first beta weekend, that was the resource spender that I was using, and I was super happy with the performance I was getting from it, although I just really like whirlwind, and that's kind of like why I worked it into this build. So if whirlwind's not really your game, absolutely give upheaval a try. If upheaval might even be the better version of the build, simply due to the fact of how much upfront damage you can load into an upheaval shot. Now, taking us over to the skill tree, there's actually a bunch of different skills as well as the enhancements as well as passives in the Barbarian tree, which really help bolster this Thorns playstyle. And starting us off first of all with our basic skill, of course we're going to be using Flay, and then we're going to be pushing into Combat Flay, since that just gives us a way to stack thorns right off the bat. Now, as mentioned, my rage spender is whirlwind. Unfortunately, whirlwind does not really have any way to leverage additional damage from thorns. However, it is a thing that kind of gets you into melee range to enemies. You're up close and personal the entire time, so that's just going to get more enemies to take a swing at you, and they're going to take more damage from that. Now, the next portion here actually involves a little bit of like passives as well as an interesting interaction with Challenging Shout, and that is that Challenging Shout has a mod called Strategic Shout, which basically gives you thorns as a percentage of your max life. So what we can do is we can look at things like Imposing Presence, we can look at Enhanced Challenging Shout to give us more max life, and therefore we actually benefit more from Strategic Shout's ability. Then for our last 2 skill tree based sources of thorns damage, we will be picking up Outburst as well as Tough as Nails, as both of these further on bolster the amount of thorns that gets delivered to the enemy's face every time they hit you. Now, we are also using Warcry on this, more specifically Enhanced Berserking, because as we look later on to some of the Codex of Power options that you have available for this particular setup, we will see there's a way that we can benefit from being in a berserking stance as well, which is of course given to us by Warcry. Now, just in general, by the way, we will have access to 2 shouts on this build, Challenging Shout and Warcry. Shouts are fantastic on a Barbarian. There's a bunch of different things that you can put onto your gear, you know, different affixes from the Codex of Power that can make you benefit from having shouts on, like giving you additional rage and all of that. So shouts are a really good effect on the Barbarian and should absolutely not be overlooked. And then last but not least, for our ultimate, I'm using Call of the Ancients because it's just really good and on a super low cooldown, and this is a fantastic way for you to burst on mobs, burst on packs of elites, burst on bosses. Looking then at the skill order and the way that you should play this class is probably the reason why I love it so much. It's the simplicity of it. So essentially you just run around like normal. As soon as you see some trash mobs, you just light them up with Flay. Most likely they will kill themselves by returning to attack you, and this is going to allow you to go very fast through trash mobs, things that you shouldn't be paying too much attention to in the first place. When you've built up a little bit of rage, you can mix whirlwind in there and you can cut down a few of these. But basically, as soon as you see an elite pack or an enemy that's quite difficult to kill or a boss, you simply burn all your cooldowns. And it's at this point in time when you get yourself Challenging Shout activated, you get Warcry activated, and if your Call of the Ancients is off cooldown, that you essentially press all of these 3 buttons. It causes a nuclear reaction with all of your skills, and you essentially melt your way through all of the enemies on the screen. I think it's a good time right now to mention that, as with any of the builds that I'll be sharing for this, of course, the only testing that I could do with these builds was in the 2 beta weekends that were available, and in those cases these performed very well. But it's for this reason that I mentioned at the beginning of the video that you should view these as kind of like a foundation, a place for you to start from, and then as you play this way, it's going to allow you a relative easy climb through monsters and an easy leveling up. And during that time you might figure out, hey, you know what, I want to slot this in, I want to change this, I want to move away from whirlwind, I want to bring a 3rd shout in, or anything like that. The other reason why this build will most likely also work very well is because it has 2 very clear scaling paths that automatically increase your damage output. That being the fact that emeralds, which you actually slot into your gear, give you thorns as well, and as you will be leveling up, you will be increasing the quality of your emeralds, thereby further on doubling down on more thorns for your build. At the same time, thorns can also roll on your gear, so there's additional ways in which you can actually beef this up. And then last but not least, due to the interaction that we have with Challenging Shout and Strategic Challenging Shout, this means that as you stack more max life effects, which also give you more survivability, you are also increasing your lethality, since that translates into thorns damage as well. The last thing before I let you go, of course, during both beta weekends we were able to see the Codex of Power and unlock some of the different aspects inside there, but generally we have a good idea of what's coming at all of the different acts and from all of the different dungeons in the game, and that has allowed me to already identify 4 aspects which would definitely increase the effectiveness of this build as soon as you can get your hands on them. Now, 2 of these will be more of a defensive nature and will increase the chance of you surviving encounters, and then 2 will actually increase your damage quite a lot. So let's start off with the 2 defensive ones. In the first place here we have Aspect of the Protector, which is actually a common aspect, which means it's available to all classes. And this is just really strong by default, because every time that you encounter an elite enemy, you are going to automatically spawn a barrier, which is going to help you with some damage mitigation, and this can happen every 30 seconds. So as you move from pack to pack, most likely you will have this up, and if you have a relatively long fight, then this can actually proc multiple times during that encounter. Now, the reason why this is relatively strong is there are a bunch of other different affixes or aspects that can work off you having a barrier in place. So this, in conjunction with some other ones, can produce some really interesting effects, and more than most probably save you from dying, but also help you to deal a whole bunch of additional damage. Now, the second defensive one is fairly straightforward. This is Aspect of Might, which is also another common aspect, and this basically says that basic skills, in our case Flay that we use, grants us a 25% damage reduction for 4 seconds. Now, you can absolutely keep this damage reduction up just by using your Flay all the time. So in cases where you are fighting something that's a little bit tougher, you can give yourself a flat 25% damage reduction just straight off the bat by just hitting them with Flay. Then rounding us out with the 2 offensive options that we have here, we have Death Wish Aspect, which is for the Barbarian. It's part of the Codex for the Barbarian, and this just says gain 46 thorns while berserking. Now, notice the blue amounts here are denoting the strength of the aspect, and of course we know that from the Codex we get the base version of this. So you will be able to find off of gear better versions of this that will most likely have a higher damage scaling than 46 thorns while berserking, but nonetheless, anything that we can add more thorns damage onto our build is going to be good for us. Now, this while berserking part, of course, we get berserking by using Warcry enhanced berserking, and that is one of the other reasons why we picked this up. Last but certainly not least, we have Needle Flare Aspect, which is huge. This is also a common aspect, which means that if you wanted to use this on Druid or whichever other class that you want to lean into thorns, you could. But specifically on our build here, this is really good, since it says that thorns damage dealt has a 20%, and again, notice it's blue, so this amount can be more. It could maybe be 40% or 60, depending on what the roll is. To deal damage to all enemies around you. This is insane, because basically what it means is that you could be running through a pack, that pack hasn't attacked you yet, but something shoots you which procs your thorns effect, and that essentially mirrors out this damage right around you and kills a whole bunch of stuff. So absolutely keep an eye out for these 4 aspects. There's of course a multitude of other better ones most likely, but I would need to do some hardcore testing with this build first and to find the most optimum setup for it. But I absolutely think these ones are not going to be wrong for you to pick, and they'll absolutely enhance the lethality and the build overall. And that is effectively the tornado in a nutshell. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know how you are planning to spend your first couple of days with Diablo 4. If you're planning to main a Barbarian like I am, if you're going to play one of the other 4 classes, which builds you have your eye on, and if you have any questions about this setup or even some suggestions on how to improve it furthermore. I am super excited to finally have the game in my hands, as I'm sure each and every one of you are. And until then, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.